For the last 10 years, I have consistently invested in courses that I found interesting or valuable for our business at the time to continue growing the business and also continue growing my skill set. But at the start of 2023, I decided to invest the most money I've ever invested in a serious coaching program. And in this podcast, I want to share my findings from spending more than $60,000 a year for a business coach. I have sat from the sidelines and, I've heard of masterminds, I've heard of these coaching programs, and I've always wondered, what's it like inside it? Why do people pay $100,000 a year to be in the room? And so I've watched from the sidelines, and we finally did. And I want to share from the inside what has kind of happened and what my observations have been through that process. But to kind of pull it back a little bit, we peaked our revenue and then plateaued from 2017 to 2022. It was 5 years of the same crap. We had people coming and going, clients coming and going. Our business just got stuck. And the thing was, I had these big revenue. I had these really big profit goals, but it was like a roller coaster ride. Like, we would hire people, we would fire people, we would start building systems, we wouldn't use the systems, we would start over because everything changed, etc. And then it was the start of 2023, and I'm sitting down with one of my friends, Zach, and we're sitting at this, we're like eating ice cream at Dairy Queen. Just we catch up every now and again, and he's a business owner and very successful, and we're sitting down and we're talking, and Zach tells me he just wrapped up a year being in a mastermind. And we're talking about it, and I was like, well, what's the value in it? What did you see from it? And he talked about some stuff. And then he asked me how much I had invested in my own education the previous year. And it was like almost nothing at the time. It was like almost nothing. I think we invested a few $1,000 in just miscellaneous small things here and there. And he kind of just looked at me and he's like, dude, you don't have a budget for your own education and growth? And I was like, nope. So he told me he budgets $30,000 a year for his own personal growth. And at the time, I'm like, dude, I've never spent, like, that's like a part-time salary that I could cover to have an additional person. Like, I've never invested that much before. And he invests $30,000 in himself. And so he kind of basically gave me a hard time. And he's like, dude, you need to start investing in yourself. You need to take this. Like, if you want to go to the next level, you have to talk to people and be in the room with people who are at and well beyond the next level. And so if you're always the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. And so I kind of left. I felt a little bit convicted. And there'd been this guy that I've been following for a while. And he was this Australian business coach. And there was something about him that I really liked. I've been following him for a couple of years, and there's something about him I just really liked. Like, he had been in business for over 15 years. He had tons of experience. He had lots of systems, and he had this program called Black Belt, where he taught trainers and coaches like me in our industry, like, how to grow really big businesses. And when I say big, like, I mean big. Like, $1 to $3 million was the starting line of most of the coaches that he worked with in the business and the people that he trained. But many of them were doing $5 million, $10 million, $20 million, $40 million, $108 million a year. And it was really mind-blowing to me because I had never personally known anyone in our industry to ever do $100 million, like a personal friend of mine that I was in contact with, do more than $100 million per year. You listen to podcasts, you see stuff, like you know of people that are doing that, but you don't usually personally know them. And I didn't. And so we had owned our agency for about 8 years at the time, and I really wanted to step into more education. I really wanted to step more into training and coaching, which is a lot of what we do today. And knowing it was likely more than my budget to work with them and work with this coach, I scheduled a call with his team. And that's when I found out that it was a starting 12-month commitment at $2,500 a month for his first level. So basically $30,000, $2,500 times 12, right? And then the second level was $60,000 a year. Well, I had never invested that much, but I had just recently left a conversation getting a little bit grilled by Zach. And so I was like, hey, I know he's the best. I know he has the systems. I'm just going to have to trust the process because despite the fact that it was way more than I anticipated, I thought maybe it'd be like 10 grand or something like that. And it was 30,000 for the first level. So it was way more than I anticipated. And, but I wanted to know, what was it like to be in the room? What was it like to have access to the systems? What would the speed of our growth begin to look like? And so what I want to do is I want to share what it's like to have joined it, because we joined the 30 and then we actually upgraded to the point of spending $60,000 a year to be in the mastermind. I want to share the lessons. What does that actually look like? Because for me, like, I never imagined I'd be spending $5,000 a month on a business coach. You know, that's what you pay for, you pay an employee, like their salary. This is not a salaried coach for me. Yeah, I pretty much pay them a salary, but it's not like that. I don't get all this unlimited one-on-one time that I need for this, because it's actually group coaching. Now, I can talk to the coach when I need to, or coaches in the program and stuff, but I don't have this one-on-one weekly sessions with coaches. It's not even like that. And so, you know, when I grew up, that would have been satisfactory to have that as a salary. So like, I feel incredibly grateful, and I just want to share the experience, like the initial expectations versus the reality of it, the financial impact and ROI that I've seen, like, really tangibly, in some transformational moments that really happened for us. And then what I want to do is I want to give you 3 really major lessons that I learned along the way, because it did not go entirely how I thought it would right out of the gates. Because I thought I could just join and start paying $2,500 a month and just plug their system in and start doing $10 million a year. But it didn't work like that. The training was good. It was wonderful training. Like, you go through and you're like, oh, all these, you know when you like talk to somebody or you do something, you're like, they said what my brain was thinking, but I didn't know how to say. That's pretty much how all the training was. Like, they were saying exactly what made so much sense to me, but I didn't know how to put it, and I didn't know what to do, and they were showing me how to do it. And the training was fantastic, but it was an unbelievable amount of work. And I don't know what I expected. Usually you're like, hey, I'll just pay this much a year and then it'll just do itself. And no, it wasn't. It was a lot of work. And I won't lie, like, several months in, we get into it and we're not doing a whole lot. And I contemplated backing out of the commitment because I'm like, I wasn't taking full advantage of it. I committed to it. I started paying for it, but I wasn't using it really. Like, I got in and it was almost overwhelming, and I'm like, oh, there's all this content, all this stuff I have to do. Go figure, I have to go do work. But I wasn't doing it. And so I contemplated actually backing out of it. But personally, I consider myself a man of my word. So my wife had to remind me several times, you are not backing out of this. You said you were going to do it. So I continued to invest in the program. And I told myself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to cancel at the end of 12 months. Then we're about 8 months in, and I decided to start actually implementing some of the things. So my team is slowly implementing some different things, and we didn't even do a whole lot, to be frank. We really didn't do nearly as much as we should have, like not even close to what we should have done, but we did implement some of the things that we learned. And by the end of the year, that was 2023, our revenue was up 53% over the previous year. So like, we implemented some of those systems. We'd been stuck for 5 years, and for the first year ever, we grew by 53%, which is that's pretty awesome. That's pretty big growth in a year when you've been stagnant forever. And so what I did is I figured that, hey, in December, at the end of 2023, I'm like, this December, while our team's all on Christmas vacation, I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna binge as much of the content inside this program as I can. And then I'm just gonna cancel this membership. But then I got in and I began gaining some new insight from someone else who had been there and done that a lot longer and way more successfully than I had done it. And I realized that the system wasn't the problem, I was the problem. And as I looked at the last year, it became very clear that many of the systems, even though they seemed insignificant, they were like some of the systems that we learned from them that I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to, or didn't really think about. It didn't feel tangible to me. When I reflected back and I looked at the things that we had done throughout the year, some of the systems that seemed insignificant were a large part of why our revenue was, for the first time in 5 years, up by 53%. And so I decided to just double down and actually begin doing the work in the program that would make it pay for itself. And so from learning better pricing models and sales funnels to optimization techniques and learning how to become a better leader inside our business and a better coach and a better entrepreneur, you could say that like our growth was definitely accelerated. And as of this recording, we're on track this year. This is about halfway through 2024. We're on track to experience more than 200% growth over last year, which was up 53% over the stagnant 5 years before that. And we've also upgraded to the highest tier. We spend about $5,000 a month to be a part of that, which has now exposed me to these larger thinkers and some of the top people in the world in our industry, the people that I look up to, and some names you might even know in the entrepreneurial space that are in this program to become better themselves, people I've looked up to. So I get to be in the room and in the circles with these. And so I share all this because if you've not invested in a business coach or maybe the right one, then I want to share 3 of the greatest takeaways I've had from investing more seriously in my personal and business growth in a way that I've never done before. Like I've never spent that much and invested that much because the thought is this is an expense, not an investment. And so when I started looking at it as an investment and I began tangibly looking at the return on financial impact of that investment, I began to realize some pretty crazy things. The first thing is proximity pays dividends. Part of the reason for your stagnation in your business might be the simple fact that you're playing too small and you're in the wrong circles. There's a common saying, John Maxwell, and he says, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I couldn't agree more with that. Like if you hang out with a bunch of alcoholics, what are you gonna do? You're probably gonna drink. If you hang out with a bunch of people who eat incredibly unhealthy and eat everything that's fried, you're probably gonna do the same thing. And if you surround yourself with driven, forward-thinking, positive entrepreneurs who don't make excuses for everything in their life, who don't blame circumstances or blame other people, you're gonna push yourself and challenge yourself in your ways of thinking. And the probability of winning and speed in which you experience that success will inevitably go up. But the caveat is, so long as you just lean into it and you're willing to change. Like I know a lot of, we call them yeah butters. And what it means is they're like, you could talk to them, you can give them sage advice, you could come from the trenches and say, listen, I've done this for 29 and a half years, or however long, let's say you're giving this advice, right? I've been doing this for 50 years, here's what you should do. You're gonna have people that are gonna say, yeah, but I just didn't, oh yeah, but I tried that, it didn't work, yeah, blah, 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 right? Yeah, butters. It's easy to be that. It's easy to get in that space. And so it's not just about putting yourself in the circles. You have to lean in and you have to embrace feedback. You have to embrace change and challenge your ways of thinking. If you've been doing the same thing and your revenue or your income hasn't changed in over a year, then you're probably doing the wrong things. And you could say, yeah, but I tried it this one time for like 2.5 days and something didn't work. And then you have someone else who has done it for a lot longer than that and is working just fine. Well, you probably didn't try it long enough, or maybe you didn't try it the best you could, and you need to get your skills up. You need to improve in some way. And so what's interesting is, as far as proximity paying dividends, is a lot of times the return on investment inside a community or inside working with a coach doesn't come directly from the content, but from the conversation. So for example, we had an in-person meetup in Noosa, Australia about 2 months ago. And during this conversation, there was a simple sales funnel suggestion that someone gave me that cut our customer acquisition costs almost in half. We had someone talk to us about weekly payment options for clients to help clients cash flow better and also create stability in cash flow in our own business. I ended up, and by doing that, we were able to onboard a lot more people to actually work with us. I sat at this round table where everybody at the round table, it got to me and I'm in this hot seat. They're asking me all these questions, and they found out that I didn't have an executive assistant. And boy, did I get grilled for that. Every person at this, one person had like 5 different assistants that helped her with different things full time on staff. And so I was the only person here. And I remember I'm looking around and I was like, who here doesn't have an assistant? and no one raised their hand. And I'm like, I'm the only guy that doesn't have an assistant. And so I got kind of grilled by that. And guess what? I end up hiring an assistant, and she's wonderful and takes so much off my plate and allows me to work in my unique ability. And our speed has increased since doing that. I learned from a conversation and learning from someone else there how to host sales events. And we did a sales event recently that yielded $60,000, which basically paid for our entire year of this. We learned ways to retain customers better and to cut our churn rate by 60%. And since that event, so I ran the numbers and I just looked at what are all the conversations I've learned about pricing, around funnels, around retention and lowering churn and all these things. And I added up all of the things in the last 60 days from the small tweaks we've made, and it's allowed us to make an extra $120,000 in sales. And so, like, if you want to reach new levels in your life, put yourself in circles with people who are already at those levels, and you're going to ascend much quicker with a lot less pain. That's the first lesson I learned. Proximity pays dividends. The second thing is training isn't something you did, it's something you do. So like, how are you personally, like, how are you staying sharp? Right? Like, I'm not an expert on everything, and I could figure stuff out with enough trial and error and time. I'm also pretty bold-headed and stubborn. Or I could shorten the path to winning by just having specialists in key areas of business that train me. Like, I could go learn accounting and how the law works and how to do certain things that will allow me to use legal IRS loopholes that are going to allow me to have more profit at the end of the year. Or I could just pay someone to do that or to show us what we need to know. And so training isn't something you did, it's something you do. You need to constantly be training yourself in getting better. If you advertise and you manage your own paid media, but you don't have a pulse on the market and and it's all down to trial and error, it's gonna be so expensive for you to try to figure it out. So what's gonna happen is you're gonna learn a way of doing something and you're gonna keep doing that way of doing something. And then it stops working. And then what do? Then you have to figure it out. Or you need to go to someone that does this already in hundreds of accounts, or has a massive pulse and has an entire budget allocated to testing, and is taking the arrows for you so that you don't have to. And so training isn't something you did, it's something you do. You have to be training, you have to be growing. And so that's the second lesson I learned. And the third lesson is you can borrow beliefs until yours break through. And so I believe that our beliefs are shaped largely and primarily by the people around us. And most of the time, their beliefs are very limited, which is why it's really hard to ascend to new levels in our business, because it's entirely uncharted territory. For example, if you grew up in a poor household, kind of like I did, you probably have a lot of beliefs around money that you don't realize. You know, if growing up, every time money came in, it got spent, then you might have this use it or lose it before it's gone mindset. And you might have the habit of immediately buying new equipment or taking home a massive profit or blowing it on something anytime you have a record month, only to put yourself back in a bad cash position and wildly stressed out. Right now, I'm the highest income earner in my entire family and my extended family. But on the journey to that, I learned that while I love my parents, I love my family, I love all of them so dearly, I could no longer seek advice and wisdom on what to do with our money. Because any prudent investor wouldn't do what a lot of them told us to do, and that is sit on cash or go shopping. So, like, growing up, we weren't wealthy by any means. Like, we didn't vacation much, we barely went out to eat, we lived in scarcity mode. And so I had to adopt these new beliefs and find people whose beliefs I could borrow until they became mine. And I met with, so when I joined the second tier of the program that we're in right now, the mastermind that we're in right now, and when I joined that, I met with one of the coaches, kind of like I'm working with, named Chris. And I met with Chris recently to establish priorities on our business for the next 2 months. And Chris asked me, he said, what do you want to take home in personal income in the next 12 months? And I said, he's like, what would just be like an amazing thing to take home? And I was like, hey, $500,000 after taxes. And I'd be really, really happy with that. And he just asked me, he's like writing it on his notebook. He said per month, and like just didn't straight face, just like writing it. He's like write notes, and he's like, okay, per month. And I just kind of like, I just stopped and I kind of laughed a little bit. And I was like, to be honest, Chris, I haven't thought that far ahead, or that's actually that possible. And then he just like looks up from his notes and he said, I do that and some. Why can't you? And I had no answer. Just like a belief ceiling. Like, so as you pay for proximity, you'll be able to borrow beliefs of people that you've never had because you didn't think it was possible. Then eventually they can become yours. And so should you invest $60,000 a year in a business coach or $30,000 a year in a business coach in a program? Maybe, depending on where you're at in your business. But at the very least, find yourself a community and a coach, and you're gonna get to where you wanna go a lot faster and ultimately a lot cheaper in the long run. And by not investing in yourself, you might walk away from this podcast and stop listening and be like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea, and then you move on. But someone here should hopefully hear this and say, you know what, I have been living on the bench this whole time, and I need to actually take this serious and get in the game, and I need to put some risk on the line because that's what's going to move me. And if I don't, by not investing in yourself, for those of you that just shut this off and don't do anything, you're only doing your future self and business a disservice.